Karl Marx was a 19th century philosopher and economic thinker. He wrote the works Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital. This was in the 19th century. He came up with a radical set of ideas, and those ideas are contained in these books. And what Karl Marx said was that capitalism as a system is exploitative. It can flourish only at the cost of the individual, the peasant, the factory worker, the worker in the mills, the ordinary tradesman. So these were the people who sacrificed, and they sacrificed almost everything. And it was on their sacrifice that the whole system of capitalism was built, and it was thriving and it was surviving only because of this. Now these people, those who followed Karl Marx's trend of thought, they came to be called Marxists. The Marxists were against exploitation, and they stood for some other things. They stood for a uniform redistribution of wealth. They were against individual and private ownership of property. They felt that property should be in the ownership of the state or the government, and that each should be paid according to his ability and according to his need. In capitalism, what happens to the worker is something that is really pathetic. The whole purpose of life, the purpose of human life, is to be purposeful and to have an existence that can be fulfilling. Such a thing is impossible in capitalism because a worker goes to work and he works from morning to evening, and he is paid a petty sum at the end of the day or at the end of the week or at the end of the month, however it is calculated. He slogs and slogs, and he puts in all of his life force in trying to produce that product. And at the end of it all, that product doesn't even belong to him. He's alienated, separated, cut off from the product that he is producing. Neither does he have ownership of the product that he has created. There's another thing. He doesn't have ownership rights or rights of control over the means of production. So if there is machinery or tools or gadgets or whatever you could call as the means of production, they too do not belong to the worker who is actually producing the thing. He's paid a petty sum, and so that thing that he produces, it costs a certain amount, and when it is sold in distant lands to people in distant countries, to anybody who's able to pay that price, which the factory owner or the mill owner or whoever the owner is, he demands a certain price, he receives a certain price, and there is a huge difference between the cost of the product and the price at which it is sold. Now, the life force of the worker has gone into it. And as soon as that thing is produced, he has to hand it over to the owner. He has got nothing to do with it. So ultimately, the owners thrive, they flourish, they prosper. And the individual workers who put in their all into the production work, they get a small amount and they go home and they just eat and sleep, and the next day they are back at work. They have not gained anything. At the end of several years of slogging like this, they have nothing to call their own. So this is a very pitiable state for the worker, and so Karl Marx called for the workers of the world to unite. He said, you have nothing to lose. You unite. Now, this whole process of alienation, what does it mean and what does it really do? In the first place, it alienates, it causes a separation between the actual producer and the product. Because the moment it is produced, it is handed over. It doesn't belong to the producer, it belongs to the owner. So alienation is happening here. Then there is a complete separation between the producer and the means of production. There too there is an alienation. And there is also an alienation in that feeling of purposive living. Purposeful living is a human right. That too is not made available. So at the end of it all, the worker who is busily engaged in production, he is giving his life force. So there is another alienation. He loses his self. He loses his self because he'll go on producing, and at the end of it, he doesn't get much. The person who's actually going to benefit is the owner. Now, all this is done in a variety of ways, but each of it will lead in the same direction. And that is alienation between the producer, actual producer, and the product. There is no enjoyment in that production. Let's look at this in a very, very small way, something which might help you to understand, although this is not the whole of it. This is just one small aspect. Let's look at it through the production of kachori in a shop. Let's say, since we are from Rajasthan, let's talk of this. Now, there is a kachori shop and there are 3 people actually doing the work of producing those kachoris. Now, there's one person kneading the maida to make the kachori. One person is doing that. He's a specialist in that part of his work, but he knows nothing about the other 2 things that need to be done, that the other 2 people are doing. Another person is making the filling. He does all the filling and he does all the stuffing. He doesn't know how to knead, and he knows nothing about frying the thing. That is the job of the third person. And so there's a third person who's going to actually do the frying. And so the kachori is ready. But who profits by the sale of those kachoris which get sold in hundreds and thousands every day? Not these three people who are engaged in producing the kachoris. The profits go to that shop owner. He may know nothing about how this thing is being produced, but he is the one who benefits. So there is this small class of the privileged who have ownership over the means of production, and they are able to fruitfully employ a set of people to do the work, and somehow those people who are employed in this work, they begin to understand that it's all right for us to work like this. They're absolutely okay with it, and they are happy to receive the wages, whether it's at the end of the day or the week or the month. They are okay with that system, and this is how their lives go on. They lose interest in the business of living. That whole thing of making those kachoris becomes a matter of drudgery for them, because they are doing it not because they feel fulfilled in any way. They are doing it because they have stomachs to fill. They have families, and the stomachs of the members of those families have to be filled. And so at the end of a long life, there's nothing to spare. So this was a system. And what was keeping this system in place? What was keeping this system in place was a kind of conditioning of the mind. The educational system is designed in such a way and framed in such a way that people begin to believe that this is the best thing. This is the best thing for us. And so this system is kept in place. The workers do not complain. They are happy to receive those wages. And the system continues, and exploitation too continues. Now later on, there will be a lot of questioning within Marxism. There will be several intellectuals who within the Marxist circles will begin active questioning of the Marxist ideals. Marxism is left wing. It stands for the underprivileged. It stands for equality, equalizing. But things will happen within the Marxist circles. Boundaries will be crossed, and it will cause a lot of agitation to intellectuals. And when that happens, there will be another set of people who will come from within the Marxist circle, and these will be the people whom we will call the new left. Now, the new left has come up for a number of reasons, and one of the reasons is the Hungarian revolt of 1956, some of the activities of Stalin, and all these things are going to become very bothersome. And so some very basic ideals of Marxism will get questioned, and the new left will come up, and it will have its own ideals.